Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello, welcome into the show. At home today, Megan. It is far too frightful out there for us to really go anywhere other than the comfort of our own home. Jesse Montano, Meghan Angley here, talking Colorado Avalanche. We can do a little bit of NHL. We got some injury updates. Megan, how you doing today?
Doing well and feeling a little dramatic because it's not actually sticking at all yet. It's slushy though, so by the time we finish the pod, it probably wouldn't have been safe.
Well, so, I talked to Blake earlier, our boss, who did brave the roads to head in. He goes, it's not bad, but he was looking out the window and he goes, it's starting to stick and get a little slushy. He goes, I just don't think it's very cold yet. And he goes, once it dips, well below 30, like this stuff's going to freeze up pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. It definitely I'm feeling a little dramatic right now. Just a little bit. Megan, you and I did a post-game show last night. I tweeted out that link this morning. You can go find that. Megan and I did 2 intermission reports and a post-game show. So if you want our full thoughts on how the game went from last night, you can do that. You can go find them on the YouTube channel. We talked about all of it. Sorry, vaguely sober. Distracted me here because my wife and I were having this conversation this morning. On these snowy days, is it not just impossible to get out of bed and get your day started?
It's so hard. The warmth of your blankets, you don't want to leave.
Yeah, and you look outside and it's gray. It's a little bit darker in the house. So I was so wholeheartedly agreeing with that comment that it distracted me from what I was saying. We broke down the whole game last night as it was going on. And then after, Megan, we're about 12 hours later. Your thoughts reflecting on what we saw last night from the Avs.
Everything feels the same. A night's sleep later, I felt the Avs deserved a better fate. But I went back on the Georgiev side of things to look at the expected goals against because I had seen a number in game that was around 3.07. It finished 3.31 for expected goals against. So for it to have remained a 1-goal game, I think is where some credit is deserved for Georgiev. But the other thing is to highlight just how well Hellebuyck played. Additionally, his expected goals against, because of what the Avs were doing to create dangerous opportunities, was somewhere around 3.97. So a pretty good goaltender matchup last night that might get lost in the shuffle as we're evaluating goaltenders moving forward, that I just wanted to punctuate a little bit.
It felt to me, just because you mentioned the goaltender battle, just rewatching some of the, I always go through and watch the condensed games, pretty much immediately right after that night. It felt a little bit like a Connor Hellebuyck revenge game, right? Like when the Avs bumped the Jets, whatever that was, 4 or 5 months ago. Megan, you and I were both there. And what struck me the most, did you sit in Connor Hellebuyck's availability after the series wrapped? I think you did. I think I was sitting next to you. Doesn't matter. But if you remember, he spoke about, because Winnipeg reporter asked him, did you feel like you just maybe weren't seeing the puck? And he goes, I actually thought that this was some of the best hockey I've ever played in my life. But the Avs were just too much.
Yes.
It felt a little bit like a revenge game for him. Like he needed that personally last night.
Absolutely.
To not prove anything to himself. He's off to a great start, but just all right, I can still hang with these guys. I've shut him out twice before, but I can still hang with these guys.
Yeah, playoffs were a blip, and I can still contend with the likes of the Colorado Avalanche, even though it is not the complete roster. It was still very much led by Nathan MacKinnon and company last night.
Let's talk about the goaltenders in particular. Let's focus in on this a little bit. We are going to talk a little bit about Gabe Landeskog, some of the other injuries, what the Avs are facing here heading into the weekend, and a little bit beyond. But I do want to park some time here for goaltenders, Megan, because this is obviously probably the main topic of discussion right now, still in Avalanche land. For my money, up until last night, Justus Annunen was the only one who had really kind of like earned that next start, had earned consecutive starts with his play. I thought Alexander Georgiev was outstanding last night, especially given what we've seen out of him early in the season here. That was, in my opinion, easily his best game. He looked sharp. He looked in position. He looked square to shots. I think you probably go back to him and see if he can build on that a little bit. What did you think of Georgiev last night? And how would you handle this going forward? At least one game at a time, because Jerry Bednar's told us that's all they're doing for right now.
And I think it's important. I think with this season, we're going to have kind of this before the Anaheim game and after the Anaheim game in terms of evaluating the goaltenders, just because that's when things started to kind of turn around for the whole team, but also for the goaltenders. Justus Annunen strings together the win streak. It just changed the conversation completely. But you can't ignore what happened at the start of this season. And that's where Georgiev is at a bit of a disadvantage. Before that Anaheim game was really grim, and it prompted the three goaltender rotation that we're evaluating right now. I thought his performance last night was excellent. But because of the before Anaheim times, he still has a lot of work cut out for him. The Anaheim and the Chicago game, not the best game from the Avs. So when you're evaluating strictly on wins, Justus Annunen absolutely has a clear advantage. But I wanted to pull from natural stat trick the after Anaheim time numbers for all of the goaltenders. Now for Kaapo Kähkönen, this isn't favorable because he's had that one game, which was just that difficult Tampa game. But
it was a difficult start. I actually liked the way he finished that game as well. So that even complicates it further.
I fully agree, which is why I'm not ready to, on this one game that I liked from Georgiev, just move full steam ahead Georgiev. It was great. It was necessary. Poor Kaapo Kähkönen, like in these natural stat trick numbers I'm about to read, kind of just like put him on a shelf separate from it because it's not fair. And he's only played one game. But for Justus Annunen, in the 6 games that we've seen, again, this is the after Anaheim times, his goal save above expected is 1.57, but his expected goals against is 15.67, 17 rush attempts against. For the other goaltenders, 4 for Kaapo Kähkönen in that one game, 8 for Alexander Georgiev in his 3 following the Anaheim times. That's kind of putting aside the horrible games at the start of the year. 17 rush attempts for Justus Annunen in 6 games. He's got the best goal save above expected of the goaltenders so far. Alexander Georgiev still trying to cover some ground even after Anaheim times. Putting aside those bad games, he's still sitting at about 0.38. So it's still a little bit low. His expected goals against 7.76 in 3 games. So Annunen, it's close proportionately, but Annunen still has the edge, I guess, is what I'm trying to drive home. You just look at the high danger goals against, it's 2 for Kähkönen from the Tampa game, 8 for Annunen in the 6 games, 5 for Georgiev in 3. So that has been where we've maybe had some context for some Georgiev goals too. It's like, oh, that was, I don't know, so-and-so in the slot. That's probably a slap shot from blah, blah, blah. Right. The face-off dot. That's probably really hard to contend with. I still think Annunen has the lead, but I also don't think any one of these goaltenders has completely run away with it. Again, putting Kähkönen in the mix, he settled into that Tampa game nicely. I just want to see more. I think you need to see more from Georgiev, but once we start talking about Jonathan Drouin and Miles Wood and the reassignments the Avs have made recently, with Nichushkin coming back in a week, they're going to have to make a decision soon. And if it were up to me, I don't think this is enough information personally.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I want to circle back to those reassignments in a minute because I think that's an interesting conversation given the timing and who it was. But Meghan, so I always love a good the before times reference. And let's take a broader step back, right? To even further before times. To me right now, the issue with Alexander Georgiev is the consistency. And that's an issue that spans back beyond this season. And I think that's why it feels so hard to look at what he did last night, which I thought was great. but it makes it hard to just be like, all right, cool. Your confidence is restored. Here we go. Because not only was it a bad start to this season, but it felt like all of last year was just a constant roller coaster, constant up and down. He was winning games. The Avs were putting up dubs in front of him. So it was easy to kind of, say, oh, well. But it just feels to me like the start of this season really kind of dug up all of those. How do we really feel about this guy? Can he be reliable? Yes, he bounced back after a really, really tough game one. He bounced back to play really well the rest of the way in the playoffs. But can we trust that he's going to do that? How do we know that he's not going to dig himself out of this hole? And I do just think that that's why, in addition to everything that you just read off, in these smaller sample sizes, I still think that you're probably favoring Annunen right now, just because this is an issue for me with Georgiev that isn't just, the rough start that he got off to. There's traces of this that go back to last season and really even the season before that a little bit when he was really good for the Avs.
I think that's what makes a front office nervous, to just run full steam ahead with a Georgiev after a great game, because we've seen great games from Georgiev. And so because we've also seen the lows, it's hard to know, just based upon the great game, that the bad ones are not going to happen anymore. And I think the biggest tell has been the mental side of the game for Georgiev, and being able to turn that page in the Winnipeg series after game one was a huge step forward. But then the start of this year made it feel like that great work had been undone a little bit, which kind of puts us back at square one in Georgiev and evaluating him. You get the great Georgiev performance, and that's actually not really new information. We knew Georgiev was capable of a game like last night. I think what really needs to be learned is, has he really turned this page? Can he handle the mental toll of being the full-time starter past the great game? And that's what we have yet to see with Georgiev. And frankly, we don't have a lot of time to really learn that about him, because there's now 2 seasons behind us of kind of mixed results that makes this really hard for Georgiev. I'm sympathetic to the positions he's in, because I do think there's a great goaltender there, but the Avs aren't in a position to take a gamble in net.
Right. And there's 2 comments I want to go to here. One is, can he string a few together? And then this one right here of, can I make the case that Georgie is a playoff goaltender versus a regular season one? Sure, you could make that case. And I think based on his results in Colorado, you'd actually have a decent argument to make. But it's the comment there of, can he string a few together? That, to me, I think is just the question that the Avs front office, the Avs coaching staff doesn't know if they have the answer to. And I think you make a great point there, Megan, about we're running out of time to find out. It's part of the reason why you and I have both said fairly confidently this is probably Georgiev's last year in Colorado, pretty much no matter what. He either plays so well that you can't afford him, or he's so up and down that you're saying, yeah, we're just not going to bring him back. And I do start to wonder if that's factoring at all into the thought process here of, do we need to shift our focus to making Justus Annunen the pseudo number 1 because he's going to be here beyond this season? He's an internal option that we've developed up. Can we put our eggs in that basket, try to get a number 1 out of him, instead of trying to see if we can get it out of Alexander Georgiev, who's probably only in Colorado for a few more months?
Yeah, I think you mentioned this on the last podcast, or even as recently as the post game last night, the
They all run together
too, in needing to make a decision on the doorstep of receiving Val Nichushkin back. And based upon our most recent Landeskog update, they're still expecting him back at some point this season. They're going to need to then accommodate the contracts of some of these big players returning to the lineup. Not only can they not afford to run with 3, but maybe this helps to resolve a goaltending question if they can alleviate some of that salary with a player like Georgiev. That's a bolder take. And going back to my earlier comment, I sympathize, because I think there's a great goaltender in Georgiev. I think there's truth in that there would be interest in Georgiev for a desperate team that does not have any solution in that, whereas the Avs kind of have 3 right now.
Yeah, and I did a radio hit the other day, and it was funny because as soon as I jumped on, Josh Dover. I don't know if you know Josh at all. Great dude. But he goes, Jesse, the old saying, when you've got three goalies, you've really got none. And, like that is a little bit the situation the Avs are in right now. You're pulling from such a large pool of options that, to your point, okay, is there a team out there that's desperate for one who doesn't have even the three options that the Avs have that I know fans don't necessarily love them right now. But those are three viable options, right? NHL options, maybe not full-time number ones, but whatever. We can debate that all day long. But I also think, and look, I've been asked this enough, about if there's a possibility that they're going to trade him. That I've tried to do a little bit of research into who might potentially even be a fit, in terms of a trade partner. Forget a goaltender, but like what team might even make sense. And really making like it's slim pickings out there. There are not a lot of teams that you think would be willing to move on from one. There's not a lot of goalies out there you'd probably be interested in on teams that do have them available, or at least they wouldn't be any type of, market difference or improvement. The only one that I can look at that I think makes any level of sense, and there's some gymnastics to make it work, it's John Gibson in Anaheim. That's the only one that I can even identify as that would be a guy that I could see the Avs being interested in. I could see Anaheim being interested in moving on from him. And I could see them being interested, the Ducks being interested in taking Georgiev back in return to play 50-50 / behind Lucas Dostal. They have the cap room to make it work. They could eat half of Gibson's salary to make it work for the Avs. He doesn't want to be there anymore. They've got a solution in Dostal. That's the only team, the only situation that I've looked at in the little bit that I've researched it that I think would make sense from both sides without the Avs. And like it would cost more, it would cost Georgiev plus picks plus probably prospects. Not to mention this is a very popular sentiment that John Gibson is not the goalie he once was. He's older. He's too injured, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sitting here advocating for the Avs to go out and acquire John Gibson, but I'm just saying when I step back, this comment here, give me anything over Gibson, go find me something that makes sense. And I'll agree with you. But I just can't find anything else that I think adds up. Is there any netminders, any teams that stick out to you that say, if the Avs want to go down that road, I could see them doing this?
No, I think that's a testament to where Georgiev has value still in Colorado that maybe people take for granted. You look at even the upcoming goalie free agent market coming this summer, Georgiev's going to be the best option out there. And people know that. Teams, organizations know that. And so that just heightens his value a little bit. I think your earlier point, like, yeah, the Avs are juggling three goalies and maybe one isn't a bona fide starter, but that's also just by design, how the Avs constructed the team. That was the position that they sacrificed a little bit. I think the issue is that none of these three options totally wow us. And so to your point, a Gibson or insert any goaltender that is realistically possible probably won't wow me any more than Kähkönen, Georgiev, or Annunen, just to be fair. Not a Gibson hater, but I agree that his career is on the decline. It's the back half of the career, and he wouldn't really move the needle in terms of the options that they have presently anyways. So, if they were to part ways with Georgiev, I don't know that it has to be a goaltender coming back in return.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying you think they could theoretically move on from him, excuse me, and roll with Annunen and Kähkönen for now?
And look, I don't love this, but
it's an option though.
Insert Gibson here. That doesn't really enthuse me more than Kähkönen and Annunen, if that makes sense. So yeah. If there was a better option I believed was out there, a goaltender that was realistically available, I would agree. I'd want more comfort in that position than what they have currently. I just think Annunen's too untested in the playoffs. I don't know what he looks like in the playoffs at the NHL level. And so I have, some concern around it, but I also think it's time to see what goaltender they have in Justus Annunen.
And I'm getting there more and more, Megan. It has been since pre-pandemic, since John Gibson was above a 9-10 goaltender even. And if we're really splitting hairs, it's been since that same time since he was above a 9.05 goaltender. You know, the one thing that would, if they did that, and again, I have not heard that they're shopping on Gibson. I have not heard that they, want to make that move. I haven't even heard they want to move a goaltender. I have not heard that they want to move on from Alexander Georgiev. Just for the sake of this conversation that we're having, though, I do think that John Gibson, for me, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you to an extent. He would move the needle for me just because that's a guy that we have seen be among the league's elite before. And I would be so curious behind this team, because Anaheim also hasn't been any good since before the pandemic. So that's another small caveat there. I would be curious to see what he looks like behind this team. But again, it would have to be they eat half, they take Georgiev back. He's a 31-year-old goaltender, so he's still got plenty of runway in front of him. But there is a good chance that, like you said, he would get here and would really kind of just be more of the same. So,
well, and isn't that the room we're in to a lesser extent with Kakinen? Like, his Minnesota numbers actually really good, but then the San Jose numbers. I'd love to see him with an Avs team in front of him, and we just don't have enough starts to see that much of Kakinen with this Avs team in front of him.
It's a great point. It's a great call out. The reason that it was semi exciting when they claimed Kakinen was because of what we had seen before with Minnesota and with some of the numbers that he was able to put up. And you were like, yeah, maybe all right behind this team. I'd like to see him get another start before they've got to make some decisions here. Like, it's hard for me right now because I really do feel like you need to go back to Georgiev tomorrow night as a reward for what he did last night, the same way you've treated Annunen. But I do think it's important for you to get at least one more Kakinen start in there before you've got to make these choices.
I agree.
Any other thoughts on goaltenders? I actually like your comment there about maybe if they want to get into that room, moving on from Georgiev and just freeing up the cap space. I think that's an interesting thought. Anything else on goaltenders?
No.
All right. Let's move on here, Megan. I want to talk about these reassignments just really quickly. This wasn't in my original rundown, so I apologize. I'm throwing something at you kind of off the cuff. Let me pull it up. TJ Tynan and Nikita Prishapov reassigned last night after the game. Paper transaction, or do you think this is a sign that we're potentially getting into a Jonathan Drouin conversation?
I instinct feel we're getting into a Jonathan Drouin conversation. And I thought that Prishapov came up and played great games. So if it was a paper transaction, I wouldn't hate that either. But looking at Puckpedia, they didn't include those recent reassignments. They were sitting at about 4.7 left in cap space. 2.5 is Drouin. If Wood is also on the brink of coming back, he's also an additional 2.5. They would have, out of necessity, needed to clear up some space, which is about 1.5 with Tynan and Prishapov together. It would have allowed plenty of space then for a Wood and a Drouin to come back. I don't necessarily want to get ahead of myself with blind optimism that now suddenly Wood is also returning to the lineup. But just from a sheer numbers perspective, like spots that are available, if a Drouin comes back, one of Prishapov and Tynan wouldn't make sense anyway. So I don't think it's completely paper transactions this time, just based on what we've heard around Drouin being on the brink of return as of late. I know that we've gotten weird Jonathan Drouin updates this whole time, but it has felt real this time that, it felt like it could have even been as recently as this last game, but we were told, all right, not that one, but potentially the one after it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm getting this optimism from. I'm really hoping that Jonathan Drouin can play tomorrow.
It would be a huge boost for them. And like you said, it's been just weird updates about Drouin, and nothing nothing crazy, but it's just been day to day, week to week. Hey, back to day to day. When he's not hurting anymore. It's like, what is going on here? So yeah, they've just been a little bit all over the place, but Jared Bednar did tell us that it's literally just a matter of how Drouin feels now. Like, so truly day to day, that to me seems like he's probably medically cleared. It's just a matter of how he's feeling. But I saw that last night, and, typically when they've done stuff like this on a paper transaction side, it's been very, it's a lot of players you really weren't expecting, things like that. That to me last night made sense in the world of we're getting players back. Like, as well as Prishapov played, you'd rather have Drouin or Miles Wood. I know Miles Wood has not gotten off to the best start so far this season. I think he was playing through some injuries. This to me feels like you're probably adding guys back in, at least
absolutely. One. It felt like, if it was merely paper transactions, they probably could have included, to your point, a few more players in that list. So I'm hoping that it just means reinforcement is on the way. And I don't think it's the last we've seen of Prishapov, too. I think he earned a lot of trust and curried favor in this most recent NHL debut and call-up opportunity.
I completely agree. I think he surprised a lot of folks, and I think that's a player that, not to get people too overly excited, but man, he just put himself on my radar for Avs prospect depth chart in a big way. Absolutely. Some people throwing around Mackenzie Blackwood in the chat. I just have to point out, not to circle all the way back to the goalies, but if we're going to say that John Gibson is washed, Mackenzie Blackwood has had a rough go of it the last handful of seasons, even being reassigned by the New Jersey Devils just 2 seasons ago to the American Hockey League. So to me, that kind of falls in that same category of what we were talking about, where it's like, yeah, you be getting that guy saying, well, we believe under or behind this defense, it could be better. But Mackenzie Blackwood, from a numbers standpoint, has not been any better than John Gibson recently.
I like Mackenzie Blackwood, and he's played weirdly well against the Avs, which I think sort of changes our view of him. But he also just feels like Kakinen in a different font. Like, goaltender in San Jose probably could play better with a different team in front of him. And I just don't think we've given Kakinen a chance yet.
I think you're making a great point. I think you're making a great argument on why we need to see more out of Kakinen. Like, they claimed him for a reason. It's because there was something there that you were saying, hey, this is intriguing. Retweet everything Megan is saying about Capo Kakinen right now. You laughed at this like you knew what this was about.
I don't have the context for it, so I'm like, Lee from PHNX, what is your cat doing?
I'll say I'm actually about to text Leah, and I'm gonna send it live right now. I'm taking a picture.
Okay, I'm glad you knew that was Leah. I thought there was a Lee from PHNX that I didn't know, but
well, I'm assuming that's Leah. I'm gonna send this to her and be like, why are you texting me about Lee's cat?
Who's Lee? No, I got it now. I'm tracking, and that actually is hilarious that Leah would have a drug dealing cat.
Oh, that's good. All right, we'll get an update from our good friend down at I wanted to say PHNX Coyotes. Wah.
Right now.
Megan, you wanted to talk about Gabe Landeskog, and you felt like there was maybe a little bit more context to give. Jared Bednar last week did allude to the fact that Gabe Landeskog took some time off the ice. I tweeted out that I thought the verbiage Jared Bednar used left open the door for maybe a little bit of a setback. Then there was a report of a significant setback, to which Jared Bednar got on the radio and pushed back on.
Yes. And in case people haven't heard this interview, our friends over at Altitude Radio have it on their Twitter channel if you want to hear it in full. I pulled and transcribed it to read it to you as directly as possible. He said, "Setback could be fair. They just changed his course of attack for a little bit because of the way he was feeling. Don't think there was any one thing that happened or something where he had major changes to it, but he's been on the ice and off the ice. There's no timeline, so if something's bugging him a little bit and he's pushing it to try and get back and it's bothering him, like if it's bothering him, if he does exercise A or skating A, then you don't do skating A or exercise A for a while. And you continue to work on the rehab, so it's just a change of course. I wouldn't call it a major setback or anything. I saw that in the news after my presser the other day. He's continuing to work and he's in the gym every day. At some point, he's going to get back on the ice and continue to try and improve and see where it goes. And when asked if there's still expectation for him to return this year, he said, absolutely. That is the goal. That's Gabe's goal. It's our goal." And he went on to affirm this a little bit more by saying if they had any inkling this was not going to happen, they wouldn't have not gotten support in terms of players. He kind of pointed to the American League call-ups like the Prishipovs and the Ivan Ivans. Like, there's a reason why you've seen these players. If we didn't feel Landeskog was making a return, they would have more aggressively targeted a more full-time option. And I thought that was an interesting part at the bottom of the interview as well.
I think that's all fair. You know, like, I don't love that there's stuff that's causing him this level of discomfort at this phase in the process. But again, if they are, going to maintain that, hey, this not necessarily all according to plan, but this is all within the treatment planning, then, you just continue to trust the process. Megan, I see people saying that they've got to move on from him. He's got to, he's got to retire. He's got to be done. I just so don't agree with that. People also have to understand that first season, there was a lot of uncertainty, even within the organization. Didn't know the extent of it. Didn't know how bad it was. He was trying to get through this without doing this surgery, right? He was trying to find ways back. So I think it was fair to say that first season, the Avs were a little bit in the dark as well, as was Gabe Landeskog. What people have to understand right now is they have a very good understanding on where this is at. They have a very clear picture of where Gabe Landeskog is and if it's realistic to be expecting him back within a week, a month, 2 months, 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. If they felt, I think Jared Bednar makes an outstanding point there. If they felt Gabe Landeskog was not coming back this regular season, they would be utilizing that cap space. The fact that they haven't, I'm glad you read the full thing because to me that does add to they're trying to get through because they internally, who have the most knowledge on this recovery, feel as if he's going to come back. I do think people need to remember they're intentionally not putting out all the information. And if they're not doing anything with that money yet, it's because they feel pretty good about it.
I agree. And I think I see where people sometimes have that reaction, like upon hearing the initial Bednar presser, people reacted, there's been a major setback. And then I think born from that is where people got back on that he should just retire. It's not fair to the team train. And I just think I'm trying to think of the word. They're operating off of maybe not the best information, which paints it in an even worse light. And I think it's all rooted in fear and panic, and it's not misplaced. Like, there's so much uncertainty around Landeskog and this injury, but I think we have to remind ourselves the courtesy that he is owed for everything that he's done for this organization and this team in an unprecedented injury, then needing kind of an unpredictable timeline to return from it. You know, I look at Lonzo Ball, who has played in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the NBA games early this season, preseason, and has gradually ramped up his minutes, finishing with 18 minutes the last game. I think he has a wrist injury right now, which has sidelined him, which is a little bit confusing, but
Yeah.
I'm going to continue to have some optimism that when Gabe finally does give that green light, it's, you know, it's for good reason that there were maybe some delays in getting there. And I just have so much respect for what he did for this Avs team and to get them to a cup that they're still in a position. Look, they'll have to make tough decisions eventually, but I just don't think we're in that room where they have to make any rash decisions around Landeskog. You know, in Bednar's quote, he talks about there's no timeline. So if something's bugging him, and that's important, I think, to key in on. Like, you're right, there is no timeline. There's no specific time that he has to return. So he's going to take this extra cautiously.
And you know, I am of the opinion, I'm almost kind of the opposite of where people are at, where I'm like, you're at this point. What is waiting a couple more months now? A couple more weeks now? Who cares? You've already waited this long. So I don't know. We'll see. Lonzo has gone from 20-ish points a night to 8 a night, but it's got to be rust for now. Yeah, I mean, he didn't play for 2 years, and I imagine it'll be a similar thing with Gabe Landeskog when he does come back. Vaguely Sober, wait a minute, merch with your name on it. The mug was actually gifted to us by a great listener, but the shop has been set up behind the scenes. It is getting ready to go live, so you'll be able to get all the Guerilla Sports merch that you want. Coming soon. Coming very, very soon. Looking ahead to this week. Anything else on Gabe Landeskog?
No.
By the way, Leah said LMAO. What? So I'm not sure if she's fully aware if her cat's a drug dealer or not. According to the comments.
That's probably pointing to the cat being a drug dealer.
Yeah, that was an awfully suspicious reply. So Leah is at least aware that people think her cat's a drug dealer. We got a new member here, Megan. Stacy B coming in, new member. So excited. We've been actually working away on a lot of the membership stuff this week. And it's going to be very exciting. Thank you so much, Stacy. Stacy and Vaguely Sober in this chat.
Welcome
members
aboard, family.
Yes, Guerilla fam, another new member. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to let her know it's the OGs read. OGs read. Let's see.
OG ad reads.
All right, well, I'm going to tee you up so I can text Leah back. Megan, it doesn't get any easier for the Avs tomorrow. They welcome the Carolina Hurricanes into town. Jets 13-1 after last night. Carolina coming in 10-2. This is a volume shooting team. They put pucks on from everywhere. They make it difficult to get things through, but this feels like a team that you can get through on the goaltenders more so than you were able to last night if you can repeat what the Avs did. Your thoughts on what the Avs got to do tomorrow?
Yeah, Carolina is a scary team. They've won their last 6 games, which also feels ripe with opportunity. Like, come on, you can't keep winning games. It's the perfect opportunity for the Avs to snap a win streak of Carolina's own, get back in the win column for themselves. And there's this emphasis on needing to play better in front of their home fans. They've stacked together a couple of wins in Ball Arena, but not nearly enough for anyone to feel comfortable with that. So I think there's a component of pride at play here too for the Avs to put together a strong performance against the Canes. And I think in acknowledging that it's a good team, that gets them up for the game just by itself. And the potential for reinforcement in a Jonathan Drouin, that's going to get them up for this game pretty excitedly. But even without a Drouin, the return of Arturi Lehkonen has injected a little bit of life back into this group. I think Nathan MacKinnon specifically has been energized with the return of Arturi Lehkonen, and it's just made them look better. And I think process-wise, we talked about a lot of things they did well for much of that Winnipeg game. They just have to keep building on it. You know, they seem to be a little bit exhausted at the end of it all, but I think it's a very repeatable effort against yet another good team. And there's the goaltending conversation. You know, the stakes are high for every individual goaltender now on any given night. So no matter who's going in net, there's a lot of pressure to perform very well. And that's kind of why, to your earlier point, I hope it's Georgiev because he played so well. I think he's out to prove something, you know? And I want to see then what kind of goaltender you get from him in that situation. But Carolina, it's a team to contend with for sure. They're so complete right now. I'm looking at their forward group, and it's a pretty great one. Even on their back end, I like the way that they're constructed. You know, they got old friend Sean Walker there in Carolina this year, and I don't think we got to see him utilized in the role that was maybe best for him, and I think that is a role that Carolina can provide for him. So there's a couple of storylines there I'm looking forward to as well.
Do you feel, all right, I got a question and a statement here. The statement is, when you add the next player back, you're going to start to replenish some of your depth a little bit. Suddenly, Casey Middlestat is going to have a Drouin or a Lehkonen or a Rantanen to skate with regularly. So that's going to be really nice too. It's going to be the first time where you're getting an injection of life back beyond the top three players, your first line. Second, do you feel that maybe the return of Lehkonen hasn't just provided like the energetic boost, but also like a structural, almost kind of like glue back to this team? Because the details just seem more on point in the last two games. Defensively, they seem a little bit sharper. And I just thought what Nathan MacKinnon told me after the game a couple nights ago when Lehkonen returned. Why am I completely drawing a blank on who they beat?
Oh my gosh. Seattle.
Thank you. He said there are a few players in the league you want on your team more than Arturi Lehkonen. It feels like he's had an impact on the roster in the lineup beyond just being a morale boost. It seems like there's more structure to what they're doing.
I think it's 100% true. Just at every end of the ice, they've looked better. And it's, to your point, even the defense looked better, I felt. And I think it's a little bit of the load being taken off of some of these things, and also some of these things executed to the way they were supposed to be. Like, there's a familiarity in that top six of how they're supposed to defend in their own end and help one another. And that is something that Arturi Lehkonen understands perhaps better than anyone. You brought this up earlier in the year, how they were missing key defensive forwards. I think that shouldn't be understated in what Arturi Lehkonen brings back in terms of stabilizing the group. But then the other side of it is even the way in which they're creating chances, there's more of a playmaking component to it. Yep. And I think we all agree that we'd like to also see them just shoot more, but pucks are getting on sticks to sticks because of Arturi Lehkonen in that top six. And that's where, to your point too, like with then a Middlestat, how does this line get better with the Jonathan Drouin coming back? You know, not sure exactly where he gets placed if Lehkonen is now playing with Middlestat, for example, but that's the difference between a Kiviranta and a Logan O'Connor on that line. You know, they're doing a lot of things well, responsibly, but some of that creativity that you want to see in the top six just hasn't been there. I think that's a little bit of what's been returned to it in having Lehkonen back as well. And the bottom line just gets, the bottom line, not literally, but the whole of the team gets better when you add a Drouin back into the picture too. You, I think, talked about the trickle-down effect as well. And there's so much truth to just finish and execution and how even just one player makes all of those things, the odds of that being better, I think impacted in a pretty significant way.
You're 1 week out from Val Nichushkin's return to the lineup. I agree with what Vaguely Sober has here in the chat. In a week, this team is going to look very different. I agree with that. Look, Jared Bednar alluded to it again this week. They are trying to keep their heads above water right now. They are just treading water till they can get back healthy. And I actually think that's a great, healthy mindset for them to have, Megan, and understanding, look, for the guys that are in the lineup, the expectation is the same. You know, Josh Manson told us last week, it's a work ethic based problem, not problem, but like everything they're doing is work ethic based. If your work is right, you're doing the right things, you're paying attention to the details of your game, you're going to tread water. You're going to stay in the fight. And they know that's what they have to do. I think it's good for them that as a whole, they've taken a step back saying, look, expecting us to get the same results that we would get with a full season, with a full roster, that's not fair. So can our work ethic be there? Can the details be sharp? And can we do the right things long enough to keep us in the fight? And I think they've done that fairly well to this point, especially if they get Druin back for tomorrow. I think that's a huge boost, and they've just got to do it for another week and a half. And then you feel a lot better about where this roster is.
That's what I like about their first period in Winnipeg. They give up the first goal against a minute, 6 seconds in. And that first period, it's not dominated by the Avs. They're just, to your expression, they're not bleeding out all over the ice. I think that's how they need to approach things, right? Like, not every period needs to be classic Avalanche hockey in terms of being fast and creating off the rush and high danger opportunities every shift. They just have to be responsible first and foremost, and then they add the other stuff. And they did later in that game. And I think that's what's sustainable for them, is as long as they lock it down and be responsible as a priority first, then they can build the other classic Avs hockey things back into their game.
For one, with Druin and Val coming back, we might have 2 solid power play units again. Yes, this will all help with load management as well. And Megan, we hear Jared Bednar say it all the time, and you just alluded to it a bit there. With Jared Bednar doesn't do it, so we shouldn't either. You cannot judge purely based on the result, win or loss, because there's a lot that happens within those 60 minutes. And I think if you've watched the last couple games, yes, they didn't get the result they wanted last night. You have to feel encouraged about where this team is at. Given how everything started, given how the injuries have piled up, given the uncertainty that there was in the offseason around what money can they spend. We've had goalie controversy, this, that, and the other. Are they where they want to be? Absolutely not. But they put themselves in a fine spot that if you can get some guys back, go on a little mini run here. I'm not saying you got to go string 10 in a row together. Go on a mini run, and suddenly you are right back in the thick of things. And, the Winnipeg Jets, believe it or not, folks, at some point they will lose another game, and the Avs will be able to start shortening that gap a little bit at the top of the division. So it feels like they're right there. They're knocking on the door. Just got to stick with it a bit.
And it's come, with some sacrifice. Like, the team that is waiting at the other end of this meant sacrificing a little bit in the beginning. We talk about the decision around Landeskog then not getting NHL players to be put in this lineup right now and taking a chance on Prishapov and Ivan. I'm happy that they did, because the reason they did that is because what's waiting for them on the other side is Nichushkin and Landeskog, players that they were counting on getting back, and they're still counting on getting back. Now there's end in sight with the Nichushkin conversation, but I think at the beginning of the year, it felt really grim because it wasn't clear what all of this sacrifice was for, and looking at this really incomplete lineup of guys that you just didn't really know, there was a reason for all of it. And it did mean, sacrificing some results, some points that I think they have such confidence in the team that's waiting for them on the other side that they can make up that ground.
The other thing with it too is if you're a glass half full type of person, you can also take the silver lining out of this. If they've gotten a better, more extended look at players they never would have. There's been players who have benefited from this greatly from a development standpoint. Even a guy like Cal Ritchie, if this roster was fully healthy coming out of camp, he probably just goes straight back to the OHL. He got in a few NHL games. He's got, very clear instructions on what they want him to go work on and go back. Prishapov, same type of thing. And even a guy like Nikolai Kovalenko has gotten to play up in the lineup and get a little bit taste of a taste of playing alongside Nathan McKinnon, playing against some top competition. I think there have been, as long as you get everyone back and they can bounce back, I think you actually are okay, given some of the positives that you can take out of this early part of the season.
I think it's a great point. We would probably not have known that they have an NHL player in Ivan if not for the start of this year. It's an important piece of information, too, to know that they have now kind of a choice to make in how they move forward with Ivan. But he looks to me a full-time NHLer. So what do you do with a guy like that?
Well, and you and I, again, it may have been last night, it may have been on Tuesday, but you and I had the conversation of like, boy, oh boy, for a team that all last summer was told nothing but your cupboards are empty, there's nothing in the prospect pipeline, the fact that they have had as many NHL debuts as they have had this season, and they've been as impactful as they have this season, I think needs to turn that conversation just a little bit. Prishepov hasn't gotten the goal yet, but he has been on the doorstep multiple times. Ivan, like you said, he's sitting one goal behind Medved Michkov for the rookie lead in the NHL. Like Ivan for Calder suddenly, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm saying that totally tongue in cheek, but Kovalenko jumped straight in. Cal Ritchie, look, there's a lot more that you wanted to see out of that, but I also think there was a lot of positives to take away from Cal Ritchie's time in the NHL.
Oh, absolutely.
Like this just isn't maybe as depleted of a prospect cupboard as was alluded to coming into this season.
And, he's not really a prospect, but Sam Malinsky beating Brandstrom and Shillington out of jobs is just a fun storyline that's maybe been glossed over now through this point because he's just assimilated as a full-time regular there. Yes.
You're totally right. So again, like I'm not trying to fully stand on this soapbox about like the Avs prospect pipeline, but I think they were ranked 31st out of 32 coming into this season. Man, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a ton of teams of the 30 that are ranked ahead of them that could pull 5 players into the NHL to make their debut and have them be serviceable. I haven't even mentioned Matt Steinberg because he got suspended. I almost said arrested, suspended. But again, I even feel like you felt like he fit in. Jared Bednar had nothing but high praise for him. And I agree with what we've got here in the chat. Pipeline isn't as bare as we thought.
No, I mean, Foodie's hurt. Now Steinberg's hurt. Like, there's players we haven't seen in part because they just got hurt too. And so who we've gotten to see, it's just been impressive. Hockey criminal.
Hockey criminal. What was it? Oh, damn, Megan, you had a really funny phrase, like kind of accidentally over the summer. That was something along those lines. It was something criminal, and I wish I could remember what it was because it was so damn funny. Any other thoughts on this week? Yesterday, Hurricanes coming to town tomorrow. Geez, I mean, they canceled Nuggets shoot around this morning. Like you said, it all feels very dramatic right now because it doesn't seem that bad.
No.
But they continue to be adamant that it is going to be that bad.
I keep seeing that too. I'm supposed to take my parents to the airport, and I'm like, are planes going to be able to fly if it's as bad as they say it is? I don't know.
Right. All right. I think that's about it.
That's it. I'm excited for the game tomorrow.
I am too. Vaguely sober. That's going to freeze and turn into a mess. So that's probably what we're waiting for. Everyone stay warm, stay safe out there. If you are heading out, if you live here in Denver, I mean, stay warm and stay safe wherever you live. I guess that's just a decent rule of thumb. But yeah, if you're going out on the roads, be careful. Megan, looking forward to it tomorrow. Hurricanes coming to town. Always a fun one when these two teams get together. You hope that, you wish that the Avs were maybe a little bit more healthy, but this is usually a pretty fun matchup. We'll see who's going in net, all of that good stuff. We will be there at Morning Skate, bringing you guys everything from there. Starting goaltenders, lineups, injuries, all that good stuff. We'll have all the updates for you. And then we'll be back live post-game to answer your guys' questions. We have had such great response and feedback to our new post-game segment. We want to keep it going. Essentially, you guys are having a presser with us. It's your chance to get in your questions for myself and Megan after the game. So we will be bringing you guys all of that. Make sure you are tuning in, asking your questions, all that good stuff. For Meghan Angley, I'm Jesse Montano, Guerilla Sports Off Ice. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, guys, all week. We'll be right back at it tomorrow. Thanks so much. Stay safe and warm, everybody.